Now that is one ugly calendar cover, don't you think? Or it could be a bit boring looking journal or anything, any book basically, that you would want to refresh somehow. Do you notice how this cover has a terrible sheen and ugly creases? So why not paint it over with something nice? I chose this reference photo that is special to me. More on that later. I'm a special education teacher and I'll use this calendar for the next year or so. You will see in this video a process called blocking in. Enjoy! First I'll explain the tools and materials needed for this. We need some gesso. Basically it's a mixture of white paint and glue, quite thick. You can apply it with a soft brush or use a paint roller. Without gesso the paint wouldn't stick to the surface and would later flake off. If you find basic gesso too thick, you can dilute it with water or use a thinner gesso. After the gesso is dry, we need to sand it with fine sandpaper. I use acrylic paints for this stage of the cover. Normally I work with oil paints, but for these acrylics is fine. For the block-in I only used 5 colors. I'll list them for you later. You can dilute acrylics with water or use a special medium, as I did here. Acrylics are so thin anyway that mostly they can be used straight out of the tube. To mix colors on, a glass plate is my favorite. You do also need water to clean the brush between mixes. I also like to use a cotton rag to wipe my brush into. For this particular block-in, I only used these 2 flat synthetic brushes. The idea is to lay the basic colors as a kind of map with no need to be precise. That's actually all we need, so let the fun begin. Okay, this is kind of a sneak peek on how it will look like after this stage has completed. As you can see, it's really just an underpainting. When doing this, I don't care about details or even proportions to an extent. For a cover, I might even leave it like this. But let's back a little. Here's the little pencil sketch I made on the dried gesso. Now this next clip is way old and I don't work quite like this nowadays. But this goes to show how much time is actually spent mixing the colors. At least half of the time painting is spent doing this thing. If you watch a lot of painting time lapses, you might get the wrong idea. And in this video too, I've skipped the mixing parts and sped up the process by 4. Learning to mix colors and knowing combinations is, however, a crucial skill. Most people use a palette knife to mix. I just use a rough brush. and I'm not too strict about often polluting my colors. For starters, this video is only meant to be a demonstration, not a rule book with do's and don'ts. As I like to state everywhere, painting and art means freedom to me. There are sound practices and good preferences that help us, but in the end, how you do it is fine as long as you enjoy it. Okay, you just saw me block in the tones of the sky. Here's a list of the colors I'm using. I'm following the quite practical way of beginning with the background. It's no rule by any means, but can make things easier. The atmospheric haze makes things in distance more muted. It also creates a sense of depth to use these muted bluish tones. My reference is a scan from a faded slide from 1995. Knowing the colors are faded, I try to compensate a little bit here. This might be a proper place to tell something about the source photo. I've been a rock climber since the beginning of the 1990s. And this was one of my earliest ascents in northern Norway. I was alone on a somewhat dangerous climb when I reached this rocky shoulder on the mountain at about 1,000 meters height. There were still some 500 meters to reach the top. The weather was getting worse, I was tired and hungry, and I knew I couldn't get back down the same route I had climbed. But I remember being so happy, almost ecstatic, that I carefully placed my camera on some stones for timed exposure. The cold wind from the void felt so peaceful. It was a struggle to get safely back down that night, but one of those experiences that got me hooked. I won't name the area, because I hope it will remain out of spotlight, as wild as it is still today. For me, it's one of the sacred places where I feel more at home than anywhere else, and where I always return to. It has been almost 10 years since my last visit there. So when I thought about how I'd like to tune up my calendar, it would have to be a photo to motivate me. Something that gives me strength in my work when it's hard. Something that makes it easier to pick up this calendar. It didn't take long to figure out which photo it would have to be. I'm actually planning to make a really big painting later on of this one. Therefore, this makes for a good study. So that's the story behind this project. Now I'll comment a bit on what I'm doing here and what I've already done, obviously. You'll notice the colors are warmer here, on the other side of the fjord, but they still are quite subdued. While I was doing this rough painting, I actually didn't plan to continue beyond this blocking phase. I thought I'd leave it in this rather impressionistic style, mostly because I don't know how well the paint will stick, or the moving around in backpacks and rubbing against all kinds of surfaces. Not something a painting should have to go through. But as I saw it in its present shape, I started to think, maybe it could survive the year of usage. Maybe I could even varnish it before use. Then once the calendar would become obsolete, I could cut out the cover, figure out a frame for it, and in the end hang it on my wall. There's really no reason why I should discard it completely. So at the moment I'm thinking to paint a more detailed layer in oils, which also means there's going to be a sequel to this video. Here you see me muting down the colors even more. Details are of no importance here, only covering the area. It does help with the second layer if the colors are not way off. Okay, this is going to take some time. I'll let you watch and come in with comments when there's more reason to. If there's something you'd like explained, please leave a question below. This water here is actually part of a fjord too, just a very narrow one that splits this peninsula in two. There are a few farms alongside it, with their smallish fields by the shoreline. The mountain ridge I'm working on now is not far away, some 3 kilometers away. But the humidity in the air that day caused it to look like further apart, and again the color is more muted. Here I'm starting on the rocky shoulder. Immediately behind me, like a rotten tooth jutting out. Both the colors and contrast are getting more intense, but I'm building it up slowly. Now that I've decided to work this further in oils, I know I'm going to saturate the rocks even more. Something has to be said at this point about work efficiency, as it starts to show that I'm getting a bit sloppy. There are these brain physiological studies that clearly show we humans are not capable of working truly efficiently for more than 30 to 45 minutes at a time. This is more related to work requiring a lot of concentration. We are advised to take short breaks. In my experience, painting is a high energy activity, although in this kind of videos it might not very much look like it, just the brush moving quickly here and there, playfully almost, and it can and even should be quite playful. But as stated at the beginning, painting is over half the time making color approximations and decisions, then mixing those colors painstakingly before you see anything of what's being done here. If you're doing a very precise work, let's say a commission, your eyes will constantly go back and forth between the source and the painting surface, often getting lost and requiring you to refocus, and it really gets tiring. Not to mention that sitting upright with your arm extended, trying to keep the brush steady enough, makes painting even physically quite punishing. I've coined a little saying of mine that goes, painting is a pain thing. Now of course it's not only a pain thing, not claiming that, but there often is an element of physical and mental pain that goes with it, and you really have to notice the threshold here before you get too tired and unmotivated, and consequently you start painting sloppily and impatiently. At least take a break long enough, or even wait for another session. My excuse here is that I'm painting in acrylics and I don't really like them, so I just want to get it done in one go. So how does it show that I'm sloppier than in the beginning? Well, I'm not paying enough attention to the source photo. And more importantly, I'm not truly thinking about the forms, the rock formations, the shapes, and how light actually hits them. These are all things I usually pay close attention to. My mind won't tire away from looking and checking. But here I'm in a mode of let's just get this damn area covered. This is why I'm very satisfied that with deciding to work in oils, I have a chance to correct all my mistakes. Even if it's only a small calendar cover, it still would feel disappointing to leave it with so little regard. Here I'm deciding to simplify the lower left area a lot. In real life there was a true jumble of stones. This has not so much to do with me being tired here, but more with the overall aesthetics. It doesn't look nice. Here we have one of those little lies we artists get away with. As a consequence, there's a big dark formation there. Now as I look at it afterwards, I know the light is all wrong. It's an afternoon light coming from top right corner. Therefore I have the dark part on the wrong plane. That does have everything to do with being tired. But I'll get to fix that as well. Here I'm preparing the area, the edges around the figure. When I get to work with it, it looks quite ridiculous in many ways. It was tempting to leave parts of this process out, but I wanted to be transparent about the hiccups I had. After all, I already said painting is a struggle. And with a figure this small and a rarely used medium acrylics, I'm not that much ashamed at how comical it looks. And laughing at yourself is a good thing anyways, right? So enjoy yourself and giggle away. I'm sure the oil painting stage of this part will look a lot better. Hold on there. Wasn't my fleece green, blue in the photo? Yep, but this is another lie I get to tell. It's not that I didn't like its colors or such. But remember, this calendar is supposed to be uplifting. There's a hidden message from myself. It's not the 1995 trip, but something to come, to look for. Maybe it's next summer. Maybe I'll go there by bicycle, like we did in 1985, having just finished high school. Orange is perhaps my favorite color, and it has a tone for me. Good and happy things are coming. They are just around the corner. And orange looks gorgeous here anyways, doesn't it? We are nearing the conclusion, so just a few things about the next part. It's going to be in oils, and there will be an added level of realism. In fact, I've already started that, and it will be ready soon. I will add a link to it in the description below when it's ready. There are problems of proportion in this quick blocking. For example, the figure dimensions with an elongated arm and such. So glad to have you watching this, and hope you'll come back for part 2.